When I look back on my life, there are moments that tighten my chest and make me wonder, what did I miss? Or was fate just pushing me into this inevitable story? I used to be a man with principles, a stable job, a wife I believed was my soulmate, and a life that anyone would envy. But then, with just one sentence, everything I held dear turned upside down. One night, while we were arguing about our anniversary trip, a special occasion I had carefully planned with love and thoughtfulness, she looked me in the eye and said, without hesitation, "You have to understand that Sean will always be more important to me than you." That sentence wasn't a knife, but it cut deeper than any wound. From a peaceful life, I was thrown into a whirlwind of doubt and heartbreak. Could I accept being second to my wife's childhood best friend? Does true love endure when it has to compete with an untouchable past? If you think this is just a story about jealousy, you're in for a surprise. It's so much deeper than that. It's about the very nature of love, priorities, and the invisible lines that we fail to see until they crash into us. Marriage, friendship, betrayal, loneliness, and the complex emotions no outsider can fully understand. All of this changed me into a different man, sometimes strong, sometimes broken, but never innocent again. I'm going to take you through this intense journey, full of pain and moments of clarity. From a life that seemed perfect to everything falling apart, and finally the shaky steps toward finding myself again. You'll feel anger, sympathy, confusion, and maybe you'll even see a piece of yourself in this story. Before we dive in, drop a comment below telling us what city you're watching from. Now, sit back and enjoy the video. They say the beginning of a love story is always beautiful. Ours was no different, or so I believed. 6 years ago, I met Jenny at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was bright, full of life, and that laugh of hers, it was contagious. We bonded instantly, not just over our awkward puns or the way we both fussed over the stray cat sneaking under the snack table, but over something deeper, a sense that we'd finally met someone who truly saw us. Those early years were golden. I'd spend my days at the research lab, studying alien life beneath the waves, then come home to her weird stories about eccentric clients at her vet clinic. We'd cook together, binge crime documentaries, even make up fake backstories for the neighbors walking their dogs past our window. We had this silly tradition: every Friday night, we'd each pick a movie the other one hated but had to watch anyway. She'd roll her eyes at my love for ocean documentaries, and I'd suffer through hours of sappy romances, but somehow, it worked. Looking back, I remember thinking we were that rare couple who actually enjoyed growing old together. My colleagues, especially Mark, my closest friend at the lab, would envy the way I lit up when I talked about Jenny. Even my mom, who's not easily impressed, said it seemed like I'd finally found my person. Her parents, Carol and Dave, welcomed me in right away, treating me like another son. For birthdays and holidays, our home was always filled with laughter, warmth, and people who cared. But if I'm honest, there were cracks, tiny, hairline fractures only visible in hindsight. Back then, I told myself that every marriage has that friend who lingers in the background. For Jenny, it was Sean. At first, I brushed off his constant presence, the inside jokes I didn't get, his name popping up on her phone at all hours. "It's just childhood stuff," she'd say, "you wouldn't understand, we're like family." Some nights, she'd excuse herself from the dinner table to answer his calls. Other times, plans would shift unexpectedly because Sean needed her. Sometimes, at the end of a long week, I'd come home ready to tell Jenny about an exciting discovery from the lab, only to find her on the phone, curled up with her feet in Sean's lap, their laughter echoing down the hall. There were moments, brief but sharp, when I felt like a guest in my own home. Even so, I kept those feelings locked away, ashamed that I, the rational one, the man whose entire career is built on keeping calm in the face of the unknown, could feel something as petty as jealousy. Still, my hope always won out. I convinced myself what we had was strong enough to withstand anything. Even when Jenny invited Sean to our anniversary celebration, or when she rearranged our plans so she could help him move, again, I swallowed my pride, smiled for her sake, and reminded myself that love sometimes means letting your partner lean on someone else. That illusion, the dream of perfect love, unwavering loyalty, and a future built on trust, kept me afloat, even as the undertow strengthened. Until the night everything changed. Because the truth is, sometimes, the most dangerous betrayals aren't loud or violent. They're quiet, wrapped in laughter by the fireplace, disguised as sacrifice and understanding. Sometimes, betrayal is the slow realization that the person you trust most is giving their heart away, piece by piece, to someone else right in front of you. But I didn't know that then. I only knew that I wanted so badly to be enough for her. And so, I convinced myself it was all in my head, until the mask shattered. Which brings me to the warning signs, the little boundaries crossed, the moments my heart started whispering that something was off. Let's talk about the first cracks. At first, I thought I could live with it. After all, friendship before marriage wasn't uncommon. Sean was her other brother, and Laura, his wife, was a quiet presence at any gathering, always watching, rarely speaking. The four of us formed an uneasy orbit, me, Jenny, Sean, and Laura, satellites circling an emotional center that always seemed to be wherever Jenny and Sean stood together. My friend Mark once joked that in every marriage, there's an extra wheel. I laughed it off then, but I wish I'd listened closer. The signs weren't dramatic, just subtle breaches that, over time, dug into my confidence. One evening, I'd planned a surprise date for Jenny, dinner at her favorite vegan bistro, tickets to a jazz concert she'd been raving about for weeks. 5 minutes before we left, her phone buzzed. "It's Sean, he just broke down on the interstate," she explained, her eyes pleading. "Can we help him?" We missed the concert. I waited on the curb as Jenny comforted Sean over greasy takeout and stories of shared childhood disasters. My heart sank as I realized our special night had become just another chapter in their story. It happened again and again. Jenny would drop anything for Sean. Whether it was helping him with a job interview or talking him through a fight with Laura. Sometimes Sean would show up at our apartment, laundry basket in hand, just until his dryer got fixed. Jenny would stop whatever she was doing to help him fold his clothes, reminiscing about how their parents used to sit them side by side as toddlers. Even holidays took on a strange flavor. I remember Christmas Eve, sitting around the table with Jenny's folks and Carol, her mother, who'd whisper, "Sean's practically family, he's been here since Jenny's first steps." What about me, I wondered. Was I family, or just the guy Jenny married? Laura grew more strained each month. She'd text me sometimes, asking if Jenny could please avoid calling Sean past midnight, or if I could somehow convince her to leave the couple alone on their anniversary. But every plea felt helpless. Jenny would brush it off with, "Laura's sensitive," or, "You know Sean needs me." Little by little, I felt myself fading from my marriage. The boundaries that define love, respect, and partnership blurred. I was no longer her partner. I was a witness to a friendship I couldn't touch, a connection older and seemingly deeper than anything I could offer. Emotional storytelling, my self-worth eroded under the pressure. Was I expecting too much? Was I selfish for wanting to be someone's first choice, even once? Guilt nipped at me whenever I tried to talk about it. "Don't be insecure," Jenny would say, twisting my words into accusations I never intended. I wanted trust, not control. But when your heart is competing with a history you weren't part of, even ordinary jealousy sharpens into something that cuts your soul. Mark noticed. He'd corner me in the break room, asking, "You good, man? You seem tired." I'd brush it off, but I wasn't sleeping. Carol, always quick to offer advice, told me, "Just be patient. Jenny loves deeply, maybe too deeply at times. She'll find balance." Laura, meanwhile, was suffering, too. Once, after a tense dinner, she confided, "I feel like I'm losing my husband to his past. Does it ever get better?" All these voices mixed with my own doubts, breeding a quiet despair. I watched Jenny and Sean laugh together, sealing secrets I'd never be a part of. And every time I spoke up, the conversation ended with me feeling petty, dramatic, unworthy. Eventually, even the smallest plans became a battleground. When Jenny vetoed our anniversary trip to the Maldives to join Sean and Laura's camping coincidence, I realized I was just a supporting character in her life story. That night, the first real earthquake hit. Tired, wounded, I finally asked, "Am I ever your priority?" Her answer wasn't a scream. It was quiet, final. The kind of betrayal that breaks you without ever raising its voice. Now, the stage was set for the ultimatum, the question that would tear everything apart. Let me take you there. That night, everything came to a head. I remember sitting across from Jenny in our dimly lit living room, a tension so thick I could hardly breathe. The anniversary trip I had dreamed about, the Maldives, the sun, just the two of us escaping the world, had become a symbol of something else entirely. Not escape. Not love. But a collision of priorities and unspoken truths. I tried to explain, measured and calm, that our marriage deserved its own space, a moment just for us. But Jenny's eyes, fierce and unyielding, told me she'd already made her choice. "You're being selfish," she snapped. "Maybe because you didn't grow up with a friend like Sean, you don't get it. He's always been here. He understands me like no one else can." Those words, "he's always been here," hit me like a punch. It wasn't just about friendship anymore. It was acceptance of a truth I hadn't dared say aloud: I was never her first, nor would I ever be. I sat there, the room spinning with disbelief and heartbreak. How do you respond when the person you trusted most tells you they will always love someone else more? How do you reconcile the years invested, the dreams shared, with the cold reality of being second best? I gave her the ultimatum, the boundary I hoped might save us both, to choose me, their marriage, or Sean. A choice where there was no middle ground. It wasn't bravado. It was survival. Because if her heart belonged elsewhere, there was no future for us. Jenny's response was immediate and furious. "You're giving me an ultimatum," she spat, eyes flashing like storm clouds. But to me, it was simple honesty wrapped in pain. Yes, I gave her that ultimatum, because I loved her enough to expect loyalty, and I loved myself enough to know when to let go. She left that night with a suitcase and a storm of words, claiming I'd be sorry, that she'd come back, but deep down, I knew the cracks had grown into chasms. My phone was silent for hours, then days. The divorce process was a blur of legal jargon and cold paperwork. No children to fight over, separate finances, just the painful unraveling of everything we once dreamed. But the hardest part wasn't the legal finality, it was the silence. The absence of her laughter in the house, the empty side of the bed, and the constant replay of her words echoing in my mind. My friend Mark stood by me, a steady anchor in the storm. One night, over beers, he said, "Bro, love's supposed to lift you, not drown you." Those words sank deep. I began to realize that holding on to a love that hurts this much was like clutching shards of glass. Jenny's parents, Carol and Dave, were torn. They reached out, puzzled and hurt, caught between their daughter and me. I could see in their eyes the confusion. How could someone so loved let go so easily? But I also sensed the unspoken truth: love alone sometimes isn't enough when foundations are cracked. And then there was Laura, Sean's wife. I hadn't expected her to become an unlikely ally, but our paths crossed more after the separation. We shared silent understandings, two people watching the same storm from different windows, both hurt, both powerless. Through the pain and chaos, I learned something vital: sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not because you don't care, but because self-respect demands it. Healing starts when you accept that some doors close for good. But my story was far from over. The aftermath, the emotional fallout, and the unexpected paths we all took would reveal truths I never imagined. And that leads to what came next, a spiral none of us saw coming. Let me take you deeper into the heart of that chaos. Point 3. Breaking point, the ultimatum and divorce fallout. That night, everything came crashing down. I remember sitting across from Jenny in our dimly lit living room, the air thick with tension so suffocating I could barely breathe. The anniversary trip I'd been meticulously planning, a dream escape to the Maldives, just the two of us, had become a battlefield of broken promises and unspoken truths. I tried to calmly explain why this trip was special, why sometimes marriage needed to take priority over everything else. But Jenny's eyes, sharp and unyielding, told a different story. "You're being selfish," she said sharply. "Maybe because you didn't grow up with a friend like Sean, you don't get it. He's been in my life forever. He understands me like no one else can." Those words tore me apart. It was no longer just about friendship, it was a cold acceptance that I was never going to be first in her heart. I gave her an ultimatum: choose me and our marriage, or choose Sean. There was no middle ground. It wasn't bravado, it was survival. Because if her heart belonged somewhere else, there was no future for us. Jenny exploded, furious. "An ultimatum? Seriously?" she spat, eyes flashing. But it was honesty and pain wrapped in one. Yes, I gave the ultimatum, because I loved her enough to expect loyalty, and I loved myself enough to walk away. She packed and left that night, words swirling around me, curses, promises she'd come back, but deep down, I knew it was over. Days passed in silence. The divorce process was a haze of paperwork and cold legalities. No kids, separate finances, just the painful untangling of what we once dreamed. But the hardest part wasn't legal, it was silence. The emptiness in the bed, the absence of her laugh echoing through the house, and that phrase on repeat in my mind. My friend Mark was there, a steady rock. "One night over beers," he said, "love's supposed to lift you up, not drown you." That hit home. I realized holding on was holding myself hostage. Jenny's parents, Carol and Dave, were conflicted, torn between their daughter and me, bewildered at how things fell apart. Laura, Sean's wife, surprisingly became an unexpected confidant. We shared that same hurt, watching the chaos unfold from different angles. Through the heartbreak and turmoil, I learned a painful truth: sometimes the bravest thing is letting go, not for lack of love, but for self-respect and survival. But the story was far from over. What came next was a spiral none of us could have predicted. Let me take you there. After the divorce, life for me slowly but surely began to rebuild itself. I found solace in quiet routines, work, and most importantly, the space to finally breathe without being overshadowed by someone else's presence. But as I pieced my life back together, Jenny's story took a darker, more complicated turn, one I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I wanted to. What started as a simple friendship, with Sean and Laura, became something far more unsettling. I first heard rumors from Chelsea, a mutual friend who worked closely with Laura, that Jenny was showing up too often at their house, uninvited, unsolicited. Helping with the kids, doing laundry, even rearranging the home office. These weren't just acts of kindness, they were boundaries being crossed again and again. Laura, always reserved but strong-willed beneath her calm surface, confided in Chelsea about how overwhelmed and violated she felt. "It's like Jenny's trying to replace me," she said quietly during one of their workouts. Imagine that, the woman who once shared vacations with Sean was now overstepping into their marriage with a forced smile and a shadow of obsession. Then came the turning point, a heart-to-heart between Sean and Jenny. Sean, who had always been conflict-averse, tried to handle it delicately. He told Jenny he cared for her, but only as a friend. That he loved his family and had no room for anything else. That conversation should have been a boundary. A line drawn in the sand. But Jenny heard something else. Hope. In her mind, the gentle rejection wasn't absolute. It was a challenge. A puzzle to solve. So she doubled down. The gifts appeared, thoughtful, expensive, impossible to ignore. The late-night calls turned to surprise visits. Once, Laura came home to Jenny cooking dinner in her kitchen. A surprise, Jenny called it, but Laura saw it as an invasion. This cascade of inappropriate behavior eventually blew past any sense of friendship, spiraling into stalking, frequent hangouts, uninvited appearances, emotional outbursts when told to leave. Neighbors called the police when Jenny was found outside the house, knocking and screaming about being kept apart. The very friendship Jenny claimed was more important than her marriage to me had become toxic, destroying not only our past but a marriage she was never meant to disrupt. From my side, I could scarcely believe what I was hearing. Laura reaching out to me, sharing details, seeking empathy. It was a surreal alliance formed from shared loss and frustration. We both felt trapped in the fallout of Jenny's obsession. And through it all, Jenny herself was unraveling, caught in a loop of denial, longing, and self-destruction. Watching it unfold was haunting, a woman hurt by her own choices, unable to see that the very thing she chased was slipping further away. This wasn't just a story of broken boundaries. It was a painful lesson in how obsession can blind a person, how love twisted into possession destroys everyone involved. But Jenny's story didn't end there. The spiral led her to new, dangerous places. Because sometimes hitting rock bottom is just the beginning. What happened next would change everything. Let me tell you about it. After all the chaos with Sean and Laura, I thought Jenny had nowhere left to fall. But life has a way of surprising us, often when we least expect it. It was Chelsea, our mutual friend and unofficial gossip headquarters, who first told me about Max, a new name in Jenny's story, someone unlike anyone she'd ever been with before. Max was younger, wild, and reckless where I had been steady and reliable. Mark, my friend from the lab, described him bluntly, a spark in the dark, but more like a wildfire ready to burn everything down. Jenny seemed drawn to the danger, maybe even desperate to feel alive again after losing the stable love she once had. I heard stories filtered through whispers and sideways glances, late nights at dive bars, photos of Jenny and Max crowding her social feed with wild concerts and reckless laughter. At first, I thought maybe this was just her rediscovering freedom. But then everything spiraled even faster. Jenny found out she was pregnant. The timing made it clear, this baby wasn't mine. We hadn't been together in months. Yet, that didn't make the news any less heavy. I saw in her a mixture of hope and fear, hope that maybe this new life could bring a fresh start, and fear for the unknown road ahead. Max, however, reacted in the only way he knew how, by disappearing. The man who once lit up Jenny's nights vanished when she needed him most. Caught up in legal battles over fraud and a looming prison sentence, Max left Jenny to face the hard truth alone. I still can't wrap my head around how someone could just walk away when a child was on the way, but that was Jenny's new reality. Pregnant, abandoned, and isolated from everyone who once cared. Her desperation grew palpable. Jenny reached out to anyone who would listen, old friends who distanced themselves after Sean, strangers, even me, indirectly through Chelsea and Laura. But her past actions had built walls thicker than any bridge she tried to cross. Despite it all, Jenny's remorse echoed quietly. I heard she'd been reminiscing about our marriage. Saying she wished she'd appreciated me more. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same woman who once declared Sean's place above mine was now clinging to memories of a stability she pushed away. Meanwhile, my life continued in a different direction. I met someone new, someone who saw me, not just as a stability, but a partner worth fighting for. And with her, I found laughter, peace, and hope for a future untethered from old ghosts. But Jenny's story wasn't done unraveling yet. That chapter, harsh and chaotic, was about to turn into something new, something even more complicated. I'm about to take you there. Point 5. Rock bottom, love lost, new chaos. After all the chaos with Sean and Laura, I thought Jenny had nowhere left to fall. But life has a way of surprising us, often when we least expect it. It was Chelsea, our mutual friend and unofficial gossip headquarters, who first told me about Max, a new name in Jenny's story, someone unlike anyone she'd ever been with before. Max was younger, wild, and reckless where I had been steady and reliable. Mark, my friend from the lab, described him bluntly, a spark in the dark, but more like a wildfire ready to burn everything down. Jenny seemed drawn to the danger, maybe even desperate to feel alive again after losing the stable love she once had. I heard stories filtered through whispers and sideways glances, late nights at dive bars, photos of Jenny and Max crowding her social feed with wild concerts and reckless laughter. At first, I thought maybe this was just her rediscovering freedom. But then everything spiraled even faster. Jenny found out she was pregnant. The timing made it clear, this baby wasn't mine. We hadn't been together in months. Yet, that didn't make the news any less heavy. I saw in her a mixture of hope and fear, hope that maybe this new life could bring a fresh start, and fear for the unknown road ahead. Max, however, reacted in the only way he knew how, by disappearing. The man who once lit up Jenny's nights vanished when she needed him most. Caught up in legal battles over fraud and a looming prison sentence, Max left Jenny to face the hard truth alone. I still can't wrap my head around how someone could just walk away when a child was on the way, but that was Jenny's new reality. Pregnant, abandoned, and isolated from everyone who once cared. Her desperation grew palpable. Jenny reached out to anyone who would listen, old friends who distanced themselves after Sean, strangers, even me, indirectly through Chelsea and Laura. But her past actions had built walls thicker than any bridge she tried to cross. Despite it all, Jenny's remorse echoed quietly. I heard she'd been reminiscing about our marriage, saying she wished she'd appreciated me more. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same woman who once declared Sean's place above mine was now clinging to memories of a stability she pushed away. Meanwhile, my life continued in a different direction. I met someone new, someone who saw me, not just as a stability, but a partner worth fighting for. And with her, I found laughter, peace, and hope for a future untethered from old ghosts. But Jenny's story wasn't done unraveling yet. That chapter, harsh and chaotic, was about to turn into something new, something even more complicated. I'm about to take you there. The hardest lesson I've learned through all this, through heartbreak, betrayal, and shattered hopes, is that sometimes, closure isn't delivered in dramatic confrontations or grand gestures. It's quiet. It's subtle. And sometimes, we have to give it to ourselves. After Jenny's downward spiral and the chaos with Max, after the loss of what we once had, and the destruction her obsession wrought, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The choice wasn't just about letting go of her, but about reclaiming my life, my happiness, and my peace. My friend Mark, who stuck by me through sleepless nights and bottled-up pain, told me once, "Man, sometimes you gotta cut out the poison before you can really heal." And he was right. The orchid she left outside my door after everything, a gesture that could have meant reconciliation, was the moment I drew my line firmly in the sand. I threw it away. Not because I didn't care, but because love isn't about clinging to what hurts you. In the silence that followed, I began to build again. I met someone new, someone who saw me not as a project but wholly, flaws and all. She didn't just listen, she understood. With her, the laughter came back, the small joys returned, and a future felt possible again. Jenny's story, as painful as it was for me, made one thing clear: love isn't just about holding on, sometimes it's about knowing when to walk away. And sometimes, the kindest thing we can do for someone, or for ourselves, is to step aside and let healing begin. I've found peace not in forgetting the past, but in learning from it, in carving out space for my own growth and happiness. And while Jenny's story is still hers to write, I choose to move forward with hope, resilience, and a heart open to new beginnings. For anyone watching this now, feeling caught in their own storms, remember this: your worth isn't defined by who stays or who leaves. It's about honoring yourself enough to step into the light, even when the darkness feels endless. Thank you for following this story. If you've ever faced a crossroads like mine, please share where you're watching from in the comments. I hope this journey offers a little comfort, a little strength, and the courage to move forward, no matter what.